Next on Newsmax Prime, the politically correct press calls this a protest. In reality, it's a riot. The left rents a mob using Craigslist, featuring thugs waving Mexican flags and attacking Trump supporters. Also ahead, a major endorsement in Indiana. Governor Mike Pence pledges his support to Ted Cruz. Among our guests tonight, the man who has advised presidents and then ran for president himself, Pat Buchanan. Also tonight, a proposed movie about Ronald Reagan attracts criticism, and not all of it comes from the right. Newsmax Prime starts right now. Good evening and welcome to the Friday night edition of Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Of prime interest tonight, conflict in California. Rioters take aim at Trump supporters prior to last night's rally in Costa Mesa.
People are throwing things, people are going crazy.
And these aren't your people.
These are not my people. I am Hispanic, I am anti-Trump, and I am anti-violence and everything that's going on here.
Well, that was the scene last night in Orange County. Moving ahead to this afternoon, a little afternoon Pacific time, Burlingame in Northern California. Donald Trump speaking to a GOP luncheon there, and more protesters, and again, some violence. This reminder, in just a few minutes, Pat Buchanan will join us with his take on all of this. But first, we want to call on our prestigious panel. Skyping in from Connecticut, the former Lieutenant Governor of New York, Betsy McCaughey, and via Skype from America's heartland, the great state of Iowa, the president and CEO of the Family Leader, Bob Vander Plaats, and from Newsmax, New York, noted TV and radio commentator Ellis Henican. Our good friend Ellis, of course, sits on the left. For the record, Brother Vander Plaats is in support of Senator Ted Cruz, and Betsy McCaughey has taken account of all of this. She's been saying thus far she's trumping and cruising into the campaign. Thanks to you all, and let's begin our discussion. Very troubling situation last night in Orange County, California, over there in Costa Mesa. As it turns out, it was reported back in Arizona that Craigslist goes looking for protesters at $15 an hour. Betsy, what does this do to the narrative of the anti-Trump forces?
Well, it's shocking, really, to see how many people on the left are under the false impression that the First Amendment protects disruptors. In fact, those disruptors are taking away our First Amendment rights to hear our political candidates, to assemble to hear these political candidates, and everyone should be outraged at what those disruptors are doing. They're taking away our political rights.
Ellis, let me turn to you. I don't want to paint the entire left with a broad brush, and yet, since the days of Saul Alinsky and Rules for Radicals, we have seen street theater that turns violent. Add to it the component of a rent-a-mob via Craigslist, and you're not going to defend this stuff, are you?
I'm going to throw cold water on it. God, just chill out a little bit. There are so many more hostile and violent political demonstrations than what we've seen in the last 12 hours in California. My goodness, if you guys are upset about this, I think you need to stay away from the conventions in both parties this year. Listen, here's the reality. There was mild disruption yesterday. The stuff today, no big deal, apparently. And we have laws in place. If people break the law, they'll get arrested and they'll get taken to jail. And no one has really been horribly hurt. There's no great massacres here. Let's talk about gun violence.
Now, wait,
people are really getting hurt.
As you are minimizing this, we saw a terrible scene of a Trump supporter, his face completely bloody. This ain't no picnic, Ellis.
Well, listen, nobody is defending violence, and thankfully we live in a society with tons of police there. And it's inevitable. Listen, Trump has created an environment that's producing all kind of crazy reaction. In fact, he's often the one saying, punch him in the face and drag him out of there. He's the one who's created a lot of this scene. Excuse me, Betsy, if I can finish my sentence. He's the one who has created this mood. It's going to be violent, and some people will overstep the line, and so let's arrest him. No big deal.
It's the left trying to prevent the American people from hearing Trump's appealing message.
And let me turn.
The only person,
hang on. There's
the
a
only
third
person doing any shouting here is coming from Connecticut.
Well, wait a minute.
That's right. Because I'm outraged at what Ellis is saying.
Understood, and I appreciate that, Betsy. But let's bring in the third member of our panel, who is observing all this from Iowa. We note for the record, Bob Vander Plaats, you don't exactly carry the portfolio for Donald Trump. But when you hear Ellis say, well, Trump is the catalyst for all this, as a Cruz supporter, do you really see it that way?
No, I really don't. But what I do see, JD, is a collision of emotion. I mean, you have the emotion of the left, which doesn't want to debate anything on intellect. They just want to be all on emotion and how they're the victim. You also have Trump and his campaign, who's tapped into a very real emotion. The American people are extremely frustrated with Washington, D.C. and their government. So they have a collision of emotion. But what the American people want today is they want leadership. And I think that's what you're seeing with Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina. They are casting a vision of leadership that's principled, it's conservative, it's on jobs, it's on freedom, it's on security, but it's also something that actually can get done. So they're not getting caught up into the emotion of the day. They're actually saying, hey, we can actually lead us the way conservatives want to be led in this election.
Well, speaking of that team of Cruz and Carly, someone was added to the roster in the Hoosier state, my old congressional colleague, now the governor of Indiana, Mike Pence. He appeared on radio at noon Eastern time today, and he gave an interesting endorsement to Senator Ted Cruz. Let's listen.
And I want to say clearly, I like and respect all three of the Republican candidates in the field. I particularly want to commend Donald Trump, who I think has given voice to the frustration of millions of working Americans with a lack of progress in Washington, D.C. And I've come to my decision about who I'm supporting, and I'm not against anybody, but I will be voting for Ted Cruz in the upcoming Republican primary.
So, Bob, that was the endorsement, such as it was. Some people characterize it as lukewarm. Your reaction to that?
Well, it sounds like Governor Pence is running for re-election for governor. And so what he's going to say is, I need all the friends I can have in Indiana to make me be governor again. But at the end of the day, what he's saying, he goes, I endorse Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz has the judgment, he has the temperament, he has the experience, he has the leadership, he knows what he's doing. And Mike Pence is still very, very well respected in the state of Indiana amongst principal conservatives. So I believe even though that endorsement may not have been as bold as what we would have liked to have seen, it's still the endorsement that matters. And I think Ted Cruz will carry that endorsement to help him cross the finish line on Tuesday.
Now, Betsy, you may have been lieutenant governor of New York State, but maybe you remember the old saying of the Southern politician, some of my friends are for it, some of my friends are against it, and I side with my friends. Is Mike Pence just hedging his bets here?
It was a very lukewarm endorsement. And the fact is that Ted Cruz is now not up in Indiana. The latest polls show Donald Trump up by as many as 8 points, 9 points. And I'm not sure how much Carly Fiorina's addition to the ticket will help him there, because as much as I like Carly Fiorina, she is a mixed bag in Indiana. She's associated with a lot of outsourcing, a lot of loss of jobs in Indiana. And I'm not sure she's going to help the ticket there very much.
Well, let me turn to Ellis to kind of get his take. Ellis, when Republicans fight, I know you sit there and kind of chuckle, but we appreciate your analysis looking from the left to this battle on the right. Your take?
I think it's done. I think Trump's going to be the nominee. He's romping ahead. With the cost, the rules allow them to manipulate the results any way the party wants. But the political consequences of denying someone who has had such a roaring success with voters compared to any of the candidates is too great a cost to pay. So I think the battle's essentially over. Trump's your nominee.
Well, it is worth noting that in Indiana, while Governor Pence lines up with Ted Cruz, you got that situation the other night where famed basketball coach Bobby Knight endorsed Mr. Trump. And they appeared on Fox News earlier today. Coach Knight was asked about Ted Cruz and the rhetorical gaffe the Texas senator made describing the basketball hoop as a ring.
I don't think I have. A guy that would come into this state and think that we played with rings instead of baskets is not a guy that's very well prepared to do a hell of a lot.
So, Brother Vander Plaats, you're here for Team Cruz. And Iowa's a pretty good basketball state too. I mean, is it a big deal, or is it kind of symptomatic of the bumps in the road that your favorite candidate is facing right now?
It's not a big deal at all. As a matter of fact, I used to coach, JD, with Coach Knight for 5 summers at Indiana University. And so whether it's a basketball hoop or a basketball ring, I don't think the people really care about that. But you also have a guy who was fired at Indiana University for choking a student athlete, who shows a lack of judgment and temperament to continue on to be the head coach at Indiana University, who's now endorsing a guy who lacks the judgment and temperament to be president of the United States. So I think the people of Indiana will see right through that, and that's why I think they'll still embrace Cruz on Tuesday night.
I got to tell you, Vander Plaats, you checked pretty good against Coach Knight there. That was a pretty interesting argument. Betsy, female lawmakers, as we understand it, are pushing Mr. Trump to choose a female for his running mate, saying that'll help soften him and deal with the whole dust-up with Megyn Kelly and others. I can see you shaking your head. You don't think that's a good idea?
It should be a low priority. Number one priority, pick someone who has the intelligence and the knowledge to actually be president. And number two, from a strategic point of view, pick someone from a state with a lot of electoral votes in play, a state that's not necessarily in the red or Republican column. In other words, make this pick with garnering sufficient electoral votes in mind. So pick a big state you can't count on.
Well, okay, with that criteria, you got somebody in mind, Betsy? Who would you like to see Trump pick?
Well, I'm just going to point out that it was very clever in a way for Ted Cruz to pick Carly Fiorina, not because she's a woman, but because California might be in play.
And, well, it could put it in play, and Donald Trump's attracting some voters.
Big states that we can't assume are in the Republican column: Ohio, Florida, New York, California. That's where he should be looking.
Well, now let's get
with Trump, every state's in play.
All right. Well, that's an interesting point, Bob. Let me very quickly to Ellis. Ellis, tongue firmly planted in cheek. Who do you think that Donald should pick for his running mate? 15 seconds.
I'm with Betsy. I'm with Betsy on that. It ought to be someone who has the temperament and the intelligence and the judgment to be president. And that way, there'll be at least one of those on the ticket.
I figured there would be some sort of haymaker thrown verbally, and it came from Ellis. You don't disappoint. To all three of you, we thank you for your time, and we want to hear what you think at home. Who would you like to see as Trump's running mate? Well, you can send your comments to me, newsmaxtv.com/comments, or via Twitter, where our handle is @NewsmaxPrime. Up next, Pat Buchanan.